All good.
All good. Here we go. Dr. Hannah Macdougall. Before we get into introducing you as a superstar that you are, just wanted to touch base with everybody. What's been happening in this last week at Love Me Love You, and obviously the COVID period, with frustration still building with everybody moving forward. It's obviously a challenging time that we're all facing. Once again, there's a lot of anger and bitterness and sort of uncertainty, which is causing a whole range of issues for a lot of people. But light is being able to see at the end of the tunnel, apart from all those people that thought they would risk it and sort of get to the beach with the thousands of other people on the weekend, in Melbourne. So, but please, people, we got to hang on and start keep rocking this because the big goal is that we have a rather normalish Christmas. And obviously lots of welfare warrior programs, presentations still going through, a whole range of other projects that we'll be launching into the next couple of months before Christmas. It is Mental Health Month, and we thought it'd be great to have someone that is actually really sort of skilled up in the space around mental health and wellbeing, with Dr. Hannah Macdougall, who is our guest tonight, who has a PhD in athlete wellbeing, amongst any other things that we'll get into. Amongst a couple of bachelor's, honours degrees, and the list goes on. But I will get to that in a second. But thank you very much, Hannah. I really appreciate, and great to be able to. I'm very humbled once again, as I am every week. But once we start talking with you about your life and what's going on, I'm sure the people out there will be. We're using the word inspired because we don't like that word, but it's an idea that's moving forward when people connect to their journey and make it work. So thanks, Hannah.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Dr. Hannah, we're going to call you Doc, Han, Macca. What are we going with?
Why don't we just use all of the above? I remember when I raced in Italy, we have the same announcer that follows around the World Cup circuit for us. And when he's calling out my name, so he goes, "From Australia, welcome, Hannah Macdougall." I'm like, oh yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So any or all of the above are fine.
Beautiful, Hannah. I'm going to read the list because the actual your bio that doesn't sort of give itself really as much credit as the champion you are. But you have a Bachelor in Sports and Exercise Science, Bachelor in Commerce with honours, Diploma in Mindfulness, Acceptance and Commitment Therapy Training. You're a cycling world champ. You've been at cycling world champs. Sorry, yeah. I think there's a silver medal there. You won a World Cup gold medal. You're a dual paralympian. You're the captain of the Oz swimming team. You're a former world record holder. You're a wellbeing pracademic. We're going to rock, yeah.
Pracademic, yep.
Yeah, that'll do. That's my doing it. You have, as I said, qualifications and a PhD in athlete wellbeing. And at the moment, your full-time role is your community engagement advisor for the Victorian State Emergency Service. Anything else you want to add to the list?
I do like to sleep. I'll just chuck that out there. Yeah, sleep. Sleep's important.
Talking off here, obviously being involved through the VIS and the AES for your sport now, which is cycling, and the work that you're doing there. Let's trace it right back to the very start. You are an amputee, yes. You do have you work with live with a prosthesis. Is that how you say it? Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. We're gonna rock that.
On. You smashed it. Yep.
Go. But that was from an early age, like a very early age. How did we get to here?
It's a great question. Yes, I was born without my right foot, and until I was 32 years old, I was actually telling porkies my whole life because Mum had brought me up to believe, because she believed that I was born without my right foot and fibula. And so whenever I'd talk to people, I'd be like, oh yeah, I'm missing my foot, I'm missing a bone down there, I have to wear a prosthetic leg to help me walk, etc., etc. And then on my 32nd birthday, I went and visited the surgeon to have a chat about potentially in the future, post Tokyo, look at reshaping my leg, because essentially it's like an elephant's trunk. It's really long and skinny. Circulation's not the best. So we're having a bit of a chat about what we could do. And he's like, do you have an x-ray of your leg so that we can see the bones, etc.? And I'm like, nah. So he sends me across the road, and I go and I have an x-ray, and I come back and we put up this x-ray, and he's like, well, there's your tib and there's your fib. So happy birthday. I've given you an extra bone for your 32nd birthday. I'm like, oh, that's great.
Well, that's yeah.
So it has been a massive journey in terms of, you know, life would have been very different if I had have been born with two legs, but there's so many ridiculous perks. And if we ever did want to, you know, get into a few of them, this is one of my baby legs. The toenails are painted pink. There you go. There's a bit of a close up. And then I am actually currently sitting here with my legs up, and I'm legless. I haven't been drinking already, so don't stress. So this is my day leg, my walking leg. And yes, I do love the color yellow. So this one, like, as you can see, the ankle has a little bit of shock absorption stuff happening there. And then we're currently working on a new cycle leg, which is just so exciting in the sense that this is not a finished model. So once it's finished, it'll be full polycarbonate, etc. This metal bit will be gone, and it'll just have the cleat to clip straight in. So it'll be a lot lightweight. This is kind of similar to your BOA system on a cycle shoe. And so I kind of I push this in, and then I just screw myself up. So every day I get unscrewed as well, which is just, you know, that's completely normal for me. But the beautiful thing about this is we've actually gone from, we've got liners going everywhere under the table. I used to have a pin system, and it used to hold me in place in my cycle leg, and I was just finding I was getting a lot of bone bruising on the bottom. Sorry, I dropped me prop. Ugh, it's on the floor. Uno momento, per favore. Okay, here we go. So this is the new liner. Kind of looks a bit dodgy there now that I'm looking at it on screen, but it doesn't have a pin on it. It's just a silicone liner. Goodness gracious, Lance, we could have fun with that one. But that not having a pin. Is there kids on the line?
Yeah.
Oh. It's some really good steps in the right direction. So, I mean, in terms of how did it all start, because I am an amputee and I get new legs, and quite frequently, to be honest, unfortunately, just because I'm a very difficult patient, my poor prosthetist, I've given her a few grey hairs. But the team at ProMotion Prosthetics, a shout out to them. You know, getting these legs made, and there's all the inspirational pictures on the wall, and you know, there was a guy who had one leg and he had 3 massive medals around his neck, and it had a caption Paralympian. When I saw this when I was 8, and I, you know, turned around to Mum and said, Mum, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to become a Paralympian. And so I think, like, you know, if you start focusing on things, then you start carving the way, as long as you know why you're doing that, and having that, you know, we'll touch probably more upon that later in the chat, but having a why is super important. You just figure out the how along the way.
Yeah, but as you're growing up, yeah, you know, and that idea of, you know, we just want to belong, we don't want to be like everybody else. When did you first realize that things were different?
There was a few clues along the way. So bless my younger self. I'd get home from kindergarten and I'd be a bit tired and cranky until I'd get some food, and then I'd go to bed each night and I'd take off my prosthetic, and then I'd try and take off my real leg as well. Like, Mum, why isn't this one coming off too? She'd be like, darling, that one doesn't come off. That one stays on. But I think I can pinpoint one of the moments. It was when I was 6 years old and I was lined up on the side of the pool with my classmates, and we were doing our kicking, and I'm pointing my toes and I'm kicking. And I looked at my friend next to me, and both of her feet had a freckle in the middle of the foot. And I was just, take that back. I was just like, why don't you have a freckle in both of the middle of your feet? Because I have a freckle in the middle of my foot, but you don't have it in both of yours. Why is that? And they're like, well, Han, you've only got one foot. And I'm like, oh, yeah. So not everyone has one foot with a freckle in the middle of that foot. We're all different. And I'm like, so that was one of the moments that I started to realize I was maybe a little bit different. But I went to an all-girls school my whole life, and it was beautiful. They just knew me as Han. When somebody new would come, they'd be like, why is Han a bit different? And they're like, oh, what, has she got boogers coming out her nose today or something? Because that's pretty usual. And they're like, nah, she's missing a bit of her leg. And they're like, oh yeah, we forgot about that. So it was really normal, because I've never known any difference. So yeah, I haven't acquired my disability, and I've had it since birth. So it, pros and cons with that.
There are pros and cons, and obviously playing part of that journey. You said not recognising it as any different, just a part of, it's a part of what is your life. But you found swimming at an early age, correct? Because
that's correct.
You thought pole vaulting was too boring or something like that, or you get into swimming and take over, and it became your chosen sport for solid 15 years of your life or something like that, I think. Is that right?
Yeah, about 10 years I swam at the elite level, and then you had all the years prior to that leading into it. So I did stink like chlorine 24/7 for a good decade. Yeah.
And I'm not fussed by the actual whole swimming thing, but how did you get through the idea of looking at a black line for the whole idea, for the whole session, your training, for the events, looking at a black line?
Yeah.
It's amazing. That's what I think. Like that and reading. Like I get 3 laps in, I just want to go to bed.
Yeah, I mean, I ask myself that these days. I'm like, Hannah, how did you do that for so long? And I think I just must have had a bit of a screw loose, to be honest. I mean, not that I, want to bring down any of my fellow swimmers out there, but I don't know, like it doesn't change. It was actually one of the reasons why I did stop swimming, was just because I got so burnt out from looking at that black line that I needed to have a change. So it takes a special type of person. I mean, you can find it quite meditative. Yeah. But yeah, it's nowhere near as social as cycling. Can't talk underwater, otherwise you'll drown.
Which surprises me that you chose swimming as your sport, because the conversations that we've had, you seem to like have a bit of a chat, which obviously leads you into your role, in terms of being in that community engagement with the state emergency service. Where did life get you from that, the idea for swimming? We'll talk about cycling in a second, but your job there, what does that actually involve?
So it's a great question. We make it up every day. No. My boss she'll kill me if she hears me say that. I'm in a really special position in that VIC-SES, Victoria State Emergency Service, recognised way back in 2016 that they really needed to harness the good work they were doing in community resiliency And then so they've put a strategy around it. So then we start to measure resiliency, and what we measure, we look to improve. So I've had a massive task of shifting the way we train our volunteers in terms of that resiliency space, and helping them, providing them with the skills and the tools and the confidence to go out into the communities to start shifting that behavior around emergency preparedness. So it's all about, it's behavior change. It's taking small, simple steps that will make meaningful differences when essentially the shit hits the fan for an emergency, whether it be a storm, a flood, or earthquake, landslide, etc. What are some simple things that will actually be helpful? And we're really behind Neighbour Day. So each year in March, it's about the 3rd-ish Sunday of March each year, Neighbour Day occurs, and that's just all about connection. And I think the pandemic has absolutely shone the spotlight on how important that is. And so that's one of the things we advocate. So it's all kind of the jigsaw puzzle pieces associated with that, in terms of the programs that support it, the collateral that supports it, the people that support it, and then bringing that all together. So it's keeps me out of trouble, that's for sure.
Definitely. And obviously, there's no greater emergency or bigger emergency that we've been through. That is called 2020. Obviously, my parents were impacted in the Gippsland bushfires, and obviously the bushfires that hit up all the east coast of Australia. It's, how did you deal? What was your involvement there? How did you make that work?
So SES is a support agency to, for example, MFB and CFA, who are now Fire Rescue Victoria, in terms of that bushfire space. So we look to support those primary agencies for that and provide response where required. Whereas we have primary responsibility for storm, flood, earthquake, tsunami, and landslide. And we've been super busy recently because the Bureau of Meteorology have just declared that we're in La Nina, which means there's these whole seasonal patterns and shifts, and essentially the perfect storm is coming together for us to have a really wet October and November.
Oh, awesome.
So I know we've got bushfires, we've got COVID, and now we might have floods. Thank you, 2020.
Thanks
so
for
yes. We're pretty solidly gearing up for that, and in terms of emergency preparedness, we're just encouraging people to know their local flood history by looking up your local flood guide, and so that's all on our website. And then just remembering, we did this really cool piece of research around how much water it takes to float a car. Oh, wow. And I don't have a pen on me, but it takes just 15 centimeters, which is the size of an average pen, to float a small car. So never drive on flooded roads is the key message there. Yeah, there's a few simple things you can do. Check on your neighbours, clean your gutters, etc. But there's a lot of good advice on our website there.
Okay, well, I'll get into that. Most definitely, it's been
that
Neighbour Day. It leads us into the connectivity. And Love Me Love You Mental Health Month is our theme is connectivity, and every year we run campaigns around just understanding support networks, the people in how we actually check in and normalise those very behaviours, which for us is important. For me, that very much that normalising that behaviour around checking in. As you said, when shit hits the fan, who you can turn to and being able to have those types of conversations. Who you obviously, you didn't get to where you are just by being a rock star. Your support network, obviously. You had mentors, there's a person, Johnny, we're talking about your superhero mum. What involvement did your mum in terms of actually leading the way for you as a youngster?
She
Make it emotional on me here, mate.
no, I was just
promotions.
Well, it's actually, she's the most amazing lady. When I look back, and you know, she raised two kids who were 5 and 0 essentially, for 5 years by herself while working full time, having a mortgage, studying an MBA, so that she could keep her job. And you know, it was tough, like in terms of those days. Like there was many happy moments in terms of getting a dog and you know, grandparents picking us up from school, but you know, I have memories of going to the supermarket, the South Melbourne market, and you know, I'd be looking at the olives and the salamis and all of the amazing things in the deli, because I think food has just been a common theme throughout my entire life. Yeah. And then being like, Mum, can we get some olives? And she'd open her wallet and she'd literally have $5 to last the rest of the day, because we'd already spent, you know, we'd got the essentials. That there was just no money. So in terms of, you know, the most beautiful gifts she did give me were just, she didn't cotton wool ball me. I definitely fell down physically and emotionally and mentally a few times, but she was there to support me. So in terms of, yes, she was the shoulder to cry on when I need it. She was the words of wisdom. And then, you know, later on in the day, when I think I was about, 23 and just finishing off university, had this nuts plan of finishing and then doing honours, and I had to do 6 subjects instead of the usual 4, and I had to get special permission from the Vice Chancellor just to do that so that my timeline would fall into place. And I'd broken a leg and I need a new leg, and my car rego was due and my uni fees were due. And so I just had essentially $5,000 worth of bills, and I came home and I was just like, oh, I don't know what to do. And Mum's like, what's wrong? And I'm like, I don't have this money. So she just, you know, she makes me a cup of tea and we sit down, and then I go to bed that night, and you know, 5 minutes later, she comes in and she's like, Hannah, are you still awake? And I'm like, yes. And she's just like, turn on your light. So I turn it on, and she just hands me a check for $5,000. And she's like, this will help you through. And wow. I knew she didn't have that money. But just that beauty, the unconditional love I have received from my mother is super special, and I feel very blessed to have that. And I didn't end up needing to bank that check because I worked it out somehow. But yeah, she's a special lady, and she's going through her own battles at the moment, which, you know, it's super tough. So she does have terminal cancer. So just cherishing each day that we do get to have in that space. So yeah, it's a super strong support network there, that I'm a lot of life lessons from.
Yeah, well, from all of us at Love Me Love You and yourself sitting here, you and your mum, big hugs, buddy.
Thank you.
And never say that I know your experience that you're going through, because it's not my experience, it is yours. You know, but hats off to you. And, yeah, I always say, you know, we live in spirit and make sure things happen and make ourselves proud and the world proud of who we are. Obviously, the legacy that's, you know, that she's put, this footprint that she's put on in this life is you. You know, and it's, you know, it's not a bad footprint to rock this world by. That's for sure.
Oh yeah, I think it's a pretty good one.
Not too bad. It's an interesting footprint, but it'll be all right, mate. But you know, obviously, that being your mum being, a huge influence in your life. And we understand family connection because, same thing for me and my mum, and my dad, have been huge role models and influences in my life. But obviously, family breakdowns and family disharmony is a big place in people's lives. So, it's we like to think that everything is rosy in our world and everything can work, but there's a whole range of challenges that people are going through right now. And in the sport, as you were growing up, your mum tried to make that life as normal as possible, which it was, yes. But were you self-conscious of it all? What was holding you back? Socially, you said, at school was okay, but outside of school, what was it?
Oh, I think I probably had a mixed bucket in terms of different challenges that I faced, in the sense, I picked a sport. COVID has ruined my brain and my pronunciation. I swear it's gone to mush. So I participated in a sport, not a sport. That'll become a new hashtag after tonight, I reckon. Where you're literally wearing next to nothing. And being a female, you have that journey of, with your body, and the confidence, or perhaps lack of confidence and esteem that goes hand in hand with that. And then couple it with, so probably in my era, we were Paralympic sport and swimming itself, it wasn't new, but it wasn't as normalized as it is today. So I was, they hadn't really, other kids, other swimmers hadn't seen a lot of one-legged amputees jumping around the pool deck and hopping here, there, and everywhere, and having to have, the the referees or the judges or umpires, I can't remember what we call them in swimming, but for a 50-meter race, I'd have my leg down this end at my start, and then I'd finish and be at the other end of the pool, and I'd need my leg. And so it was beautiful. Like, at the start of the journey, we had to have conversations with the referees to ask them if they could take my leg up there for me. And by the end of it, they were just all over it, and it was normal for them. So there was a few challenges there, and especially being a teenage girl and thinking that, for example, guys won't want to go out with me because I am missing a bit of my leg and I'm not like everyone else. And so working my way through that, and I think Donnie, one of my mentors, coaches, manager, etc., all around superhero, who I believe is doing his own podcast at the moment, with a mate of his.
Donnie Elgin.
Yes, it is. Yeah.
The great man. Hawthorn's big Hawk supporter.
Very much so. I don't think his whole harem of kids behind the Hawks, as much as he would maybe love them to be, but yes, massive legend. So yeah, we just sat down and like, Donnie, everybody stares at me when I go to the train station and I'm wearing my school dress and people can see my leg, and it was hilarious. My friends got uptight for me, and they'd be like, stop staring at her leg. Like, whoa, breathe. But he's just like, yeah, Hen, you are a bit different. But at the end of the day, you can't control what other people do. You can only control how you yourself respond to it. And personally, what I see is a young female who's going about living her life and in a beautiful way, and smashing it out on so many different fields. Yeah. And I think that's a really big reason to hold your head up high. So, I have a lot of fun in terms of when people are staring, and I can sometimes do the splits and they'll do a double take and they'll be like, what? And I get to tell a lot of fun stories about how I lost my leg. Like, you know, maybe it was because I didn't swim fast enough and a shark came and bit it off. That's a good one when I'm swim teaching, to get the kids to swim faster. Or, you know, I had one guy going at a wedding for a good 10 minutes. It was my best story ever. He's like, Han, how did you lose your leg? I'm like, oh, well, you know, do you remember Steve Irwin? And he's just like, yeah, how could I not remember Steve Irwin? I'm like, well, you know how he got carped it by a stingray, right? And he's just like, yeah. I was like, so Paralympics Australia, or the Australian Paralympic Committee, as they were known back then, we had a relationship with Australia Zoo, which was Steve Irwin's zoo, right? So because of that relationship, we were out that day where he was filming, and the stingray got Steve, and then the stingray chopped off my leg, and there was blood going everywhere, and Bindi was crying, and Terry had to call the ambulance. And I had him going for a full 10 minutes before I just pissed myself laughing. So yeah, I've learnt there's been a lot of acceptance, and I still get frustrated when I'm in pain and, you know, legs aren't fitting properly and I'm using my wheelchair, or I have to bloody crawl up on my butt each night to go to sleep, up my stairs, because I can't put on my leg and it's the end of the day and I'm feeling very sorry for myself. And so, but yeah, there's elements that have definitely become accepted, and it'll just be a lifelong journey, I think.
Yeah. And with that, you talk about acceptance and understanding of the impact that it has on you. You feel it, you know it, you live it. But to the people that don't come into contact with someone that doesn't have a leg, or, you know, amputee in any other way, what's your advice in terms of for that person? The very idea of me not coming into contact, because you automatically, something's different. You're like, I'm not sure how I should behave here. How do I act here? Any advice?
So I think my advice is it's pretty simple. Like, see the person first. So be curious about them, their story, their journey, and have that, you know, conversation in terms of, Han, you know, is it okay if I have a chat to you about this? And if you approach it in a respectful, curious way, then most people who, you know, if they're missing a leg, or if they're perhaps, you know, in their twilight years, or they come from Africa, or, you know, speak 10 languages, or have 3 heads, whatever it might be. If we respect it if we approach it in a curious, respectful manner, then most people are completely willing to have a chat, to maybe pull your leg a little bit and tell a few stories. But from my perspective, I really love dispelling a whole lot of myths, and just normalizing it, that we are all different. And, you know, like when I'm talking with kids at schools and we play the game of what animal does Hannah's leg look like, because they usually get really scared. They're like, oh, can we see it? But then when you start taking it off, they're all like, ah! Will there be blood under there? Is it going to be painful? And so by creating this game out of it, they lose that fear, and instead they start to use their imagination. And it's beautiful. Like, you get all things from elephant trunk to anteater to Mr. Tumnus from Narnia to, unfortunately, one time I did get hippopotamus. So I went on Weight Watchers after that one. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. It's a lot of fun.
And you said, and this is like with someone of any type of person, respectful and genuine in your conversations, is you know, building those respectful relationships is what we're all about. It, you know, obviously leads you into the world But before I go into your actual magical skill sets of actually your brain set upstairs, I want to talk about the Olympics or the Paralympics. What is that experience like? Because it's obviously would have been a big dream for when you started swimming to say, okay, as you said, this is my goal, is right, this is my reason why. And you work out the hows along the way. But that very experience of going into the Olympics, what was that like?
I probably would say my perspective has changed in terms of, I went to my first games when I was 15 years old. And we were known as the preschoolers of the Athens Paralympic team because 80% of the swimming team was under 18. And we all had harsh enforcements because of that. Yeah. But I think because it was just, I was happy to be there. I was excited to be there. It was my first games. So it was all new and unfamiliar, and I just had a blast. And I swam well in my own individual events, and then picked up that medal in the relay. Whereas leading into Beijing, because I was a team captain and had put so much pressure on myself to do really well, I'd forgotten the true essence of sport. Like, we're supposed to have fun, right? That's why we do the thing, theoretically. And it was all just business.
In the start, it's theoretically fun.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's...
Yeah. But saying that, I mean, I got to go to the opening ceremony, and I was still able to soak up the atmosphere at the closing ceremony and appreciate that opportunity and that huge honor that I had been given. And there's something just so super special about the Paralympics, in that not only can you feel electricity in the air, because it's just this huge party of all of these people who have trained so ridiculously hard coming together to show what they can do. And you cry tears of happiness, you cry tears of sorrow and disappointment. But there's this huge, tangible social connection that goes beyond country. So you're connected with all of these other people from all over the world, and you're united by a sense of purpose. And so you've got that meaning that's bigger than yourself. You're connected to something that's bigger than yourself. So there's this massive shift that happens as a result of that. So in terms of when you look at that from a mental health perspective, there's a whole lot of goodness there.
Yeah. It's, and it has been mentioned, and I watched, there's a show on Netflix at the moment, and talking about the Rising Phoenix or something like that, I think it's called.
Rising Phoenix, yep.
Yeah, unbelievable. Like, I was watching it at night, and I had to go to bed, but then I just stayed up, and I just had to keep watching it. It was one of those shows that just gives you those tingles, and it shows the very feeling and the emotion of just acceptance and appreciation of the joys of life and being able to do and make things work, because you're all there for the same reason, that is there just to compete and be a part of that. Sometimes your competitive edge, your competitiveness inside you gets a hold of it, but being a part of it, it's it. It was also being the birth of the Olympics, being in Athens, from way back in the day. Seeing all that culture would have been an amazing experience.
Definitely. In terms of, they were beautiful. Like their culture is one of inclusion, and we did a trip up to the top of the Acropolis. None of their methods would have passed any of our health and safety standards, but that's beside the point. So we had this like small little bird cage of a lift, like on this probably a linchpin that was literally about this big, kind of just ricketing up the top of the Acropolis. But, you know, we go and do that, and then we'd be making our way back to the village, and there'd be people on the streets, and they'd be like, "Oh, are you here for the Paralympics?" And we're like, "Yeah, we're from Australia." And they're like, "Come in, have some dinner with us." And we're like, "Okay." So it was, they were beautiful. They were absolutely beautiful in terms of hosting us. And as I'm sure Japan and Tokyo will be next year, whatever situation we do find ourselves in, they're working so super hard to make it go ahead. Even if we do still have COVID, they'll put, you know, so many different processes and protocols, and at the worst, it might be a fly-in, fly-out games, where you only go in to compete. There's not going to be the frills and the bells and the whistles, because it's such a huge financial imposition to delay it by a year. But I think it will be a games that really reminds us of the true essence of sport. So it's not about the medals. It's about coming together, connecting, and our shared sense of humanity. And sport, you know, while it has a lot of downfalls, and it's not a panacea for everything, it really does break down a lot of barriers in that sense. So fingers and five toes that, you know, we go ahead next year.
You keep getting me. I'm not too sure I'm supposed to be laughing or what I'm supposed to be doing here, but as you said, it's, you know, looking into that. What is your event like? What are we aiming for? What's I was into the cycling world, and I myself have just realised that I am officially only 12 months into owning a bike, which we'll get to my experience a little bit about that. But what events are we going for in 2021 Tokyo?
So my best opportunity to qualify for Tokyo next year is the road time trial. Okay. So it won't quite be like the recent time trial in the Tour de France. We won't have bike changes with the crazy ass climb at the finish. But saying that, the course in Tokyo is very lumpy, it's very technical, and it's going to be super hot. So in terms of strengths, we're looking for you know, that ability to have power that's not just steady state, so you need to be able to adapt to all of that. And then so the skills in terms of cornering and descending, etc. And I had to do a lot of work on that because I had a massive crash last year in Italy in training before the World Cups, where I came round a left-hand bender and there was a car coming up the other way, and I had to swerve and slam on my brakes, and I did a kamikaze flip and fractured 3 ribs and gave myself a pretty solid concussion. So I did made the most of lockdown and did some pretty solid psych work in terms of it's called eye movement desensitization therapy, which is really cool. So I worked through a whole lot of stuff there to be able to get back that confidence in terms of my skills for cornering. And then I know my coach, Nick Owen, you know, we'll do a lot of heat training in terms of to mimic that Tokyo environment. So yeah, we won't leave any stone unturned.
Yeah, and heat training is not just going indoors and putting a heater on. Explain heat training to everyone.
So if you can see, that's my laundry, that door there.
Yeah.
So it's this tiny space with a toilet in it and a washing machine. Okay. And so in that room, I smash out 2 heaters. I have a sink filled with water. So it hovers between 35 and 42 degrees, depending on how much heat I've put out as well. And at the moment, we've worked with doing 45 minutes to 1 hour with the heart rate capped at 140 to 145 beats per minute.
Yep.
And you start off for the first 15 minutes and it's all hunky-dory and you're kind of laughing. You're like, this is easy. This is ridiculous. And then your power just drops and drops and drops and drops. And you're sweating, you're pooling everywhere. And in that last 15 minutes, you're just like, why am I doing this? So you do that, for a couple of weeks before the event you're targeting, for example, or at other strategic places throughout the year to help with your training.
Okay. And you talk about that why. When the going gets tough, what do you bring it back to?
So a couple of things. The best analogy and what I find that people do relate to is, so Lance, have you seen Pirates of the Caribbean #1?
I have seen #1. Yes.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
For those who are watching at the moment and who haven't seen this movie, essentially in a nutshell, it's a pirate movie. It's set in the Caribbean. There's two main characters. One of them's called Captain Jack Sparrow, played by Johnny Depp. And another one is called Elizabeth Swann, and she's played by Keira Knightley. And one of the plots in the movie is that Captain Jack Sparrow is looking to get back his ship called the Black Pearl. So there's this epic adventure that he goes on to get back his ship. And in the middle of the movie, they're stranded on this desert, like this island in the middle of the Caribbean. So you've got your beautiful blue, sparkling crystal water, your white sand, your palm trees, and naturally they discover a stash of rum. And so they're sitting on the beach drinking rum. And Keira Knightley turns to Captain Jack Sparrow and she's just like, why are you so obsessed with the Black Pearl? And he says to her, love, it's not just a ship with a mast, a sails, and a crew. That's what a ship needs. But what a ship is and what the Black Pearl really is freedom. And for me, cycling is freedom. It's freedom to go outside, to be connected to nature, to ride up mountains and to come down them at crazy ass speeds, and to feel a sense of achievement in terms of pushing my body to be better, and to be more skillful, and to then be able to connect with other people, and then to sit around in a cafe and have a coffee at the end of it. So I feel really uninhibited by my leg when things are going right. Like, yes, I've had so many leg dramas, but when things are going right, and, for example, you've done a horrible hard ass session around Mount Eliza, going up 2 bays or etc. And then you're coming back down Oliver's Hill. You're speeding along at like 70 k's an hour. The sun's just starting to come up. You've got the bay, and you're surrounded by your mates who have also just suffered with you. That to me is being alive. So cycling is super special in that sense, and it holds a really big place in my heart. It also crosses so many barriers as well. Like, you can ride with people of all ages, all abilities, gender, etc., etc. So it is a really massive connector in that sense.
Yeah, and amazing, and that very idea and understanding of freedom, and about connecting that freedom of your own freedom with others, I think is an amazing experience. And that whole, but this is also what we can take that idea, that concept, into everyday life. Just from the normal doings of life, I think we're all going to be a lot better off in finding those reasons why and how we actually make it work. Because there is a lot of people going through some amazing challenges and ridiculous challenges as we speak, through this COVID period, due to the isolation, restrictions, the uncertainty, financial hardship, everything that's going in. But bringing back to those small, simple practices of life, I think, is where people need to start working it. As I said, I've looked back. I actually got a reminder today about some my first cycling experiences, which I'm built for a track, Hannah, track cyclist. I'm not really built for the road cycling, but I was part of our work with the Knights of Suburbia and the work, the amazing guys and girls that do the work there. Plus with our Ride With Me event that you are a part of, coming up in 4 weeks' time, I think it is. Or just over 4 weeks' time. So we're very excited about the Choose Your Own Adventure. What is your adventure that you are choosing?
Well, Lance, one of the reasons I thought I would make the most of this opportunity, because from my understanding, we're on Facebook Live now, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So if anybody's watching or watching the recording, then I need a little bit of help in terms of some creativity to create my own adventure for the ride coming up, for the Love Me, Love You ride coming up. So if anybody has ideas, please chuck them up on the chat and hopefully give me a bit of inspiration, because to be honest, I've done enough one-legged riding recently during rehab. I don't need to go down that path and choose that adventure. I do have to take into consideration, again, the rehab, and I've been a bit injured, so I can't do a crazy amount of kilometers. But I don't know, maybe it's like, juggling while I'm riding, or how many, won't say hamburgers I can stuff in my mouth at the one time, or chilies or something. I don't know. So yeah, if anybody has any ideas, I am open. They've just got to get past my coach, Nick.
Well, Mr. Nick Irwin, who he's obviously the big dog coach at the VIS, who I've actually recently engaged his services, Hannah, for an exciting project we are launching into at the end of February, start of March, with a good friend of mine, Andy O'Donnell, which I don't know nothing about it, but called an Everesting. Is that right? It's called an Everesting, something like that.
Everesting, yep, spot on.
Yeah, this is how good I'm going. This is how good I am into this cycling. I actually, sometimes when I spoke to my wife about this yesterday, for cyclists, seriously, I've been on the road maybe because of this COVID period and the restrictions have been placed. I had been on the road maybe 15 times since I had my bike, so 12 months. But I'm in here, as you can see, set up here in my gym here, 6 mornings a week, just smashing between 2.5 hours climbing every day, and I love it, and I really genuinely love it, and we're taking on this experience of doing the Everest, me and Andy, so with obviously Nick's guidance, but slightly crapping myself because maybe the realization of trying to climb up a hill 8,840 meters, carrying at the moment 95 kilos with a love of donuts, which I can't sort of really shake at the moment, which is really an issue, Hannah. It's a real issue. But as I said to someone, there's nothing that a hill won't throw at me that I haven't been through in my head myself. So it's but I'm excited by it. But maybe I'll just dangle that donut in front of my bike for 15 hours. Might be the experience.
I'm getting these beautiful mental images, Lance. Do you remember those games you used to play at like the fetes and fairs that you went to, where you had the donut hanging on the string and you weren't allowed to use your hands and you had to like eat it without using your hands? That'll be you on your bike back there with your donut hanging up.
Can you tell us that image again? Just pretend that there's no donut under the string.
It's okay, people can replay it if they really want to. But no, I think that's an absolutely it gets me excited for you personally. I wouldn't do it myself, but legs up to you for wanting to do it. It's providing you with this meaning and purpose to your training. You get to do it with somebody else, and it's gonna be challenging. Like, there'll probably be moments when you're riding up that mountain and you're like, what am I doing? There'll be, you know, we all have multiple times each and every day where it's just like, I'm nuts, or you do give up. You're like, nah, I'm done. And you know, then you turn it around because you do have that why, or you have your support network, or you practice acceptance, and you just there's this beautiful technique of saying an internal yes to what is arising in that present moment, because there is a lot of, as you mentioned, there's a lot of so much hardship going on in people's lives at the moment, and it can make a really big shift and change in terms of how we're dealing with that. If you think of you know, this resistance, if this is an event that's happening to you and you're just constantly bashing up against it by saying, why me, poor me, I can't do this, the whole body is almost tensing up when you're doing that. Whereas if this event's happening and you say yes, then you start to change that tension in relationship. You're not, you know, rolling over like a dog and or, you know, cowering in submission to the crap that's going on. It doesn't mean you can't change your circumstances. It's just that reaction to what is happening to you. And I think for me personally, that's made a pretty big shift recently in my life. So yeah, I could speak about that kind of stuff for a long time.
I'm sure we'll get you back, because I could speak to you for days. Doc, Hannah
Macdougall.
You know, but is the work that you do in that acceptance and commitment therapy, that's based there. Is how is your, and the primary mindfulness and everything else that goes with your world as well. How have you been able to actually practice what you know into your own life? Does that make sense? Like you're doing these sorts of things. It's great to have degrees, it's great to have the resource backing it up. But actually, in terms of self-implementation of doing it, it's actually a little bit more difficult, don't you believe?
Yes. Firstly, I mean, you need somebody outside your own bubble, like a psych. So I see my psych every couple of weeks or so. She's out of the mind room, and she has this beautiful blend of wellbeing and psych that she combines, which is, I really appreciate.
Yeah.
But in terms of how that plays out on a day-to-day basis, so in my training peaks, which is my training log, I do write in all of my entries for my mindfulness and my breathwork practices each day.
Wow.
So I have that measurement piece going on in there, but it's more of a tracking tool so that I can become aware of my routines and my habits. And I practice each day, probably been practicing each day for the past 8 months or so. Yeah. What's known as coherent breathing, which is where it's essentially a breath where you're connecting your brain with your body through your nervous system, and it's known as your resonant rate. And by doing this specific type of breath, which is 5 breaths per minute, roughly speaking, then we're looking to increase our heart rate variability, which is simply a measure of almost how well you're tracking physiologically based on heart rate. And then it's, Nick's going to kill for me for this butchering of this explanation. But it's almost like flexibility within your organs and etc., in your veins and your arteries and muscles and blood pumping around and all of this physiological stuff, which you can get him on the show next week and he can explain. So I do that every day, and then I practice a different type of meditation before bed each night as well. And I'm really looking to, when I'm eating my meals at the moment, extend my exhale so that I'm shifting out of my my sympathetic nervous system into my parasympathetic nervous system, so my digest and rest, so that I can actually digest my food a lot better. And then, you know, when you're on the bike, it's bringing it when there are moments of intense suffering and your heart rate's going through the roof and your legs are crying out in agony, and you're not sure how you're going to make it through the last minute of your final set at the specified power, then that's where the acceptance piece comes into it, rather than the resistance, but also bringing in the processes. So, you know, for me, that's activating my glutes, relaxing my upper body a little bit, et cetera, et cetera. So everyone will have their own processes that are helpful for them. And then one of the most other beautiful things and beautiful gifts that everyone can do at the moment is to give people that they're engaging with, whether it be, you know, during your 2 hours of exercise outside with one other person perhaps, or if it is connecting digitally via Zoom or social media, etc., is to give them the gift of your presence and to listen with the intent to understand rather than to put your own agenda forward. So listening to them and celebrating, you know, what has gone right for them, or what are the things they're grateful for, and the little things at the moment, because the little things are so important. So that's one of the really big ways that we can walk our talk, and never underestimate just how powerful it is to offer somebody your presence.
Wow. Make me want to run through a wall, Doc. It's, your words around that connectivity, and there's a lot of things that we talk about a lot, and the understanding, and you said bringing it back to that very idea of just talking without judgment, talking without need to reply, talking without and having conversations, just for allowing that very experience to happen, but allowing people to sit with their experience is one that we talk about a lot, because, you know, in that conversation, you can probably speak on it for days around the conversation between sympathy and empathy, and where people are going with that, and the misunderstandings around that, and how we actually use that sympathy is not really a great tool for support. Correct?
Yes, very correct. Great video by Brene Brown on empathy versus sympathy.
Great one. But, you know, there's a great video by Dr. Hannah Macdougall that I'm sure people will be able to watch as well. So, plus the amazing amount of publications that you've had. Is that correct? Quite a little writer.
Yes, there are quite a few publications that have a lot of blood, sweat, and tears in them.
Yeah.
For the final article of my PhD, we submitted to probably 5 journals before it finally got accepted, and just underwent so many revisions. We got really close a few times, and, you know, each time you get rejected, it hurts, because I'm human, I have an ego, and I recognize that. But yeah, we take time, we take space, and I have a whole lot of resiliency and persistence and determination as well. So it was really nice to get that one finally published. I'm actually collaborating with 4 other authors from around the world, so France and Sweden, Japan and Canada, to put together a combined perspective of just a snippet, like a few months of the pandemic, in terms of elite sport and the psychological challenges and opportunities that have come to light during that time. So yes, if you need me to write 100,000 word thesis, I can do that. I can babble. If you ask me to write a tweet in 25 words or less, I'm not so good at that.
It's, no, well, if I ever have to have that experience of writing 100,000 word thesis for something, I'll let you know. But there's a good chance that I won't have to call you. So we're all good there, mate. Different learning styles, you know, different people, different learning styles, different way of working it. But obviously, if you said if you dangle a donut at the end of that 100,000 words, there's a good chance I'll be there.
Is it chocolate sprinkles or is it strawberry flavored?
I don't discriminate. No judgment here.
Inclusive, right? Yeah, nice.
Everyone, everything, even those donuts that don't quite, form the perfect ring. I'm all for it. I don't hold anything back. It's all about love me, love you, Hannah. It's right out to a good donut as well.
I do not have any answers to that. So
do not have any. You expect you for days. Good on you. But I do appreciate it. But obviously, when's the real training load? We're talking Tokyo 2021. That is in middle of next year. Is that correct?
September-ish. Yeah.
When training camp hits, what do we? What's that process look like for the next 12 months for you?
So I actually have a meeting next week with Cycling Australia and the coaches and with my coach Nick, and we're all coming together to have a bit of a roundtable discussion to plan that. Very early days in that there might be potentially a good event to look to qualify at in March next year up in Brisbane. All things going well, then there would be a preparation camp or a staging camp in Brisbane for a couple of weeks before you actually would head into Tokyo. As cyclists, we wouldn't actually be staying in the village for the majority of the games because Mount Fuji racetrack is a good hour-ish away from there. So
warm up.
Totally, no worries. Just means you can eat more donuts, really. And so we'd be staying at a hotel closer to the racetrack and competing there, and then finishing back in the village after you've done your races. So, I mean, Nick's got planned, some altitude blocks. There'll be more heat blocks. Nationals, ideally, is in January. There'll be races on Zwift when we're allowed to start racing again. There'll be races outside with real people in real life, which we'll have to remember how to do. So yeah, it'll all like Nick's a wizard in terms of making things come together at the right time. So have confidence and faith that when your time end of February, beginning of March for the Everest, it'll all come together, and yeah, you'll be having a ripper on those descents.
Have patience is obviously not the greatest assets, but you should trust the process. I think that's what it's about. With anything we're doing in terms of support and putting ourselves out there. Sometimes trust the process and allow people in on the journey, which I'm very excited about. You talk about going back, and we're nearly finished up, mate, so you can get to bed because.
Well, the both of us can get to bed because we've both got early starts.
But I've got 3:30 start tomorrow, so I'll be going in one more donut position, then I'll be straight to bed. So it's but you talk about getting back to the real world. Normal life, cycling with others, getting back into that engagement that way. Do you have any fears about that? Because that's a lot of people that are going to have some real challenges about going back into a normal-ish routine.
I think people have to remember it's going to be a transition. Yeah. So just like it's been and still is a transition into our current situation and the restrictions that we have or that people don't have, etc. It's going to be a transition in terms of opening back up again. So like anything, when we do look at a transition space, the important things are to, again, have that support network, to take small steps rather than giant leaps. And you know, I'd say there's probably going to be this temptation to, you know, catch up with everybody as soon as you can over dinner at the best restaurants because we're so lucky in Melbourne, and we do have, there will be restaurants will reopen. I know and appreciate that some won't survive. We are ridiculously lucky that some will, and we're blessed with the food and the culture that we do have in Melbourne. So there'll be this temptation to try and do everything all at once. So my advice is just to take small steps, to remember to breathe, you know, small steps.
Oh, breathing thing is crucial.
Small steps.
Like there you are. So that whole breathing thing is small steps, and we'll get there, because there's a lot longer of this world and life that we need to be living. So another couple of months of pulling the weight is what we all need. Doc, Hannah Macdougall, Dr. Hannah, well, I greatly appreciate your time tonight, your conversation, and some absolute bombs that you delivered tonight. So it's a humbling experience to be a part of. And I'm not going to use the word inspiration, but you're just a true, genuine character that I appreciate being a part of. So for everyone at Love Me, Love You, you know, please, as you said, choose your own adventure. Ride With Me registrations are still open. I myself have put together the idea of, over the 5 days, I'm going to do the equivalent of what I'd be doing in the Everest. So I'll be doing that much climbing, plus 500 kilometres. So, but, you know, even my son Alexander, who's just turned 5 years of age, he has set himself a 5 kilometre non-stop target. So, which nice. Is we were very excited by. So, and we genuinely love that. You talked about that connectivity before, Hannah. You know, we love going for rides on our bikes as a family, him and I one-on-one. And I've recently just got a scooter, big adult boy scooter. So, you know, doing those experiences and creating those connections and memories and experiences is what we're all about. So, if you've got more and know how to get involved, get in touch. But big round of applause for the doc. You're a champion, mate, and they keep rocking it. And good luck in training and preps and everything going into 2021 Tokyo, and just being the superstar that you are.
Thanks very much, Lance. It's been a blast talking with you tonight, and I am looking forward to the Choose Your Own Adventure coming up. So I'm impressed about you'll do your Everesting and your 500Ks, and your son will do his 5Ks. So hopefully that's given my grey matter a little bit of thoughts that I can tick over and I can work with, so that I can come up with something that'll be a lot of fun. Because I think at the end of the day, what you're doing and bringing people together, creating some meaning, purpose, doing some fundraising, it's pretty bloody awesome. So well done to all involved.
Thank you very much, Hannah. Appreciate it.
No worries. Have a good night. Sleep well.
Bye-bye.